My life wasn't supposed to look like this. Not by a long shot. 5 years ago, meeting Eleanor felt like destiny, a cosmic alignment I hadn't known I was missing. I was a craftsman, an electrician running a small but thriving business I'd built with my own hands. It was honest work, dependable, offered a good life. Eleanor was just starting her ascent in the corporate world, ambitious, radiating a kind of vibrant energy that drew everyone in. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, and it was instant. Like finding the other half of a puzzle piece I hadn't even realized was incomplete. We talked for hours that first night about everything and nothing, and by the end, I was completely smitten. 18 months later, under a sky full of stars we barely saw, we exchanged vows, promising forever. 3.5 years into that forever, I discovered it was all built on a foundation of dust and lies. The crumbling wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow, almost imperceptible erosion, like waves steadily wearing away a cliff face. In the beginning, we were a unit. We shared our days, our worries, our small victories. I listened for hours about her job, the office politics, her goals. I was genuinely proud of her drive. I'd celebrated every promotion, every milestone, bought her small gifts to mark her successes. I even consciously decided to keep my business steady, reliable, instead of pursuing the aggressive expansion I'd once planned. My thinking was a solid, predictable income from my end gave us stability, gave her the freedom to take risks, to climb as high as she could. I saw it as investing in our future, our shared dream. God, I was naive. Around the 3-year mark of our marriage, the hours started to shrink. Her job didn't just demand her time. It consumed her identity. Late nights at the office became routine, followed by a predictable string of mandatory networking events, essential client dinners, or team-building exercises. These always seemed to pop up last minute, always ran late, and always excluded me. When I'd ask about them, my questions were met with increasingly thin patience. "It's industry stuff, Daniel. You wouldn't get it." Or with a dismissive sigh, "It's just boring corporate talk. Trust me, you'd hate it." Sometimes, if I pressed even slightly, the dismissiveness would curdle into irritation, accusations that I wasn't being supportive or that I didn't understand the real-world demands of her career. "It's not like your job, Daniel. Will you just flip a switch at 5?" she'd say, twisting the knife just a little, implying my work wasn't as demanding as important. It stung because I did work hard, pouring myself into my business, often putting in 10 or 12-hour days, dealing with difficult clients and complex problems. But my work didn't come with fancy titles or downtown office views, so in her eyes, it seemed to count for less. The physical distance grew alongside the emotional one. Intimacy became a historical artifact. She was perpetually tired, stressed, or claimed she needed to clear her head for an early morning meeting. Attempts to connect, to just spend quiet time together, were often deflected or outright canceled. I felt like a well-meaning, slightly inconvenient roommate. The knot of unease in my stomach tightened a little more each week. I tried talking to my friend Mark about it, keeping it general. "Eleanor's job is just swallowing her whole, man. We barely see each other." Mark, ever practical, offered standard advice about communication and making time for each other, but his eyes held a flicker of concern that he didn't voice. He just finished by saying, "Marriage takes work, Daniel. Make sure you're both putting it in, and make sure you're looking out for yourself." I nodded, pretending I just needed encouragement, when what I really needed was someone to tell me the tightening knot wasn't just my imagination. Despite the growing distance and the subtle barbs, I still clung to the woman I married, to the memories of who we were. I told myself it was a phase, the price of ambition, that maybe I wasn't being understanding enough. This self-doubt was my anchor, holding me tethered to a sinking ship. Then came the day the anchor chain snapped. Eleanor was getting ready for another business trip, a 2-day conference out of state. I was doing my good husband duty, helping her tidy up her car before she left, getting rid of the usual collection of discarded coffee cups, stray papers, and empty water bottles. As I reached into the deep, seldom-used side compartment in the passenger door, my fingers brushed against something soft, wrapped in tissue paper. Curiosity, a dangerous thing in a crumbling marriage, made me pull out. Inside the tissue was a small, dark velvet box. My heart gave a sudden, hard thump against my ribs. What was this? An impulse buy? A surprise for me? Underneath the box, tucked neatly into the compartment, was a folded receipt. I pulled out the box, opened it. Inside, nestled on satin, was a delicate gold bracelet, shimmering with small diamonds. It was beautiful, and I knew, with icy certainty, that I hadn't bought it for her. We hadn't had an anniversary or a special occasion recently that warranted a gift like this. My hand trembled as I unfolded the receipt. It was from a high-end jeweler downtown, the kind of place where a simple necklace costs more than my monthly mortgage payment. The date on the receipt was 2 weeks prior, during one of her late nights at the office. My eyes scanned further down the itemized list. Below the bracelet was another entry. Designer tie clip. Below that, a small, almost insignificant note on the receipt. Engraving, H.J. My blood ran cold. H.J. My mind scrolled through her colleagues' names, her male friends. No one stood out. Then, like a punch to the gut, the connection slammed into me. Her boss, Harold Jenkins. Mr. Harrison. My vision swam. Why would she be buying him an expensive designer tie clip? And why was my wife's expensive bracelet on the same receipt, hidden in her car? The pieces, ugly and sharp, began to fit together. This wasn't about work. This was clandestine. This was a relationship I knew nothing about. I heard Eleanor's voice from the apartment, cheerful, oblivious, almost ready. Honey, just grabbing my laptop, and I'm out. My throat was thick. Okay. I croaked back, my voice barely recognizable. I quickly, clumsily, shoved the box and receipt back into the compartment, trying to smooth the tissue paper, praying she hadn't seen me. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the keys. I pocketed the receipt in the small, damning tie clip box. I helped her load her suitcase into the trunk, pasting a smile onto my face that felt like cracked glass. Every movement felt mechanical, disconnected. She kissed me goodbye, a quick, breezy peck on the cheek, already checking her phone before she even pulled out of the driveway. Back tomorrow evening. Wish me luck with the presentation, she called out the window. Yeah, luck, I mumbled, watching her drive away, the receipt and the box burning in my pocket like embers. The mask stayed on until her car was out of sight. Then I stumbled back into the empty apartment, the silence deafening. The air felt thick, suffocating. I pulled the items from my pocket, staring at them on the kitchen counter. The elegant bracelet, the receipt, the tie clip with H.J. engraved on it. They were tangible proof of an invisible betrayal. The knot in my stomach twisted into a hard, painful ball. Months of subtle lies, dismissive words, canceled plans, late nights. It all suddenly made a horrifying kind of sense. She hadn't been distant because she was stressed. She had been distant because her focus, her energy, her intimacy were directed elsewhere. I couldn't confront her. Not like this. The thought of her denying it, gaslighting me, turning it back on me, was unbearable. I needed more. Undeniable, irrefutable proof that would leave her no room to maneuver, no crack to squirm through with her excuses. A cold, hard resolve settled over the pain. I wouldn't be played for a fool any longer. My mind, trained in troubleshooting complex electrical systems, immediately shifted into problem-solving mode. I had an old smartphone tucked away in a drawer, barely used since I upgraded. It still worked, could hold a charge, and run a simple GPS tracking app. It was low-tech but effective. That night, after she was gone, I set it up. It felt like crossing a line, a violation of trust one never thought I'd commit. But she had already annihilated the trust. This wasn't about control. It was about confirmation, about regaining control of my reality from the lies she had built around me. I practiced placing it, making sure it was hidden deep in her work bag, somewhere she wouldn't casually find it, but where it would travel with her. The next few days were an agonizing performance. I went to work, did my job, came home, pretended everything was normal, all while monitoring the dot on the tracking app whenever she left the apartment. Office, lunch, home. Normal, soul-crushing normalcy that made me question the evidence in my hand. Had I overreacted? Was there an innocent explanation? Then came Wednesday evening. The dot on the map stayed at the office late, later than usual even for her. My heart started a heavy, anxious rhythm. Around 8 p.m., the dot began to move. Not towards our apartment. It headed downtown, to a part of the city known for its gleaming new luxury apartment towers. A part of the city I couldn't fathom her having a legitimate work reason to be in at this hour. This was it. I told Eleanor I had a late emergency call for a client, a lie that felt grotesque on my tongue. She mumbled something about already being home and heading to bed, barely listening. I grabbed my keys, my primary phone, and drove. The address from the tracker led me to a sleek, modern high-rise, all glass and steel, with a valet stand and expensive cars idling out front. I found a parking spot a block away, trying to melt into the anonymity of the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The tracker confirmed the phone was inside the building. The wait was a form of torture. Every minute stretched into an eternity. My breath was shallow. My heart pounded against my ribs like a drum. My mind conjured images I desperately didn't want to see. I felt like a lowlife, a stalker, sitting in my car, watching a building. But the need to know, the desperate, burning need for the truth after months of doubt and a lifetime of shared dreams, was a physical ache that overshadowed the shame. Then I saw them. They emerged from the glass doors of the lobby, laughing together, bathed in the warm glow of the building's lights. Eleanor, looking radiant, relaxed, happier than I'd seen her in what felt like years. And Harold Jenkins, Mr. Harrison, her boss, the man whose initials were engraved on the tie, clip hidden in my pocket. He had his arm around her waist, his hand resting casually on her hip, pulling her close as they walked towards a waiting town car. And then, right there on the sidewalk, under the bright city lights, he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a quick, professional peck. It was a slow, lingering kiss, intimate and unmistakable. The world tilted. Sound seemed to drain away, leaving only a high-pitched ringing in my ears. The air left my lungs. Everything faded except for the image of them, locked in that kiss, a tableau of betrayal etched into my memory. It wasn't just an affair. It was a complete, utter demolition of my reality, of everything I thought our marriage was. The long hours, the dismissive words, the secret gifts, the trips, it all clicked into place with a brutal, nauseating clarity that made me want to vomit. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated, long-term deception, carried out with a man she worked with daily, a man who held power over her career. The level of hypocrisy and betrayal was staggering. As I got into the town car, disappearing into the city traffic, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Mark. I'd confided slightly more in him after finding the clue, enough that he knew something was deeply wrong. Hey man, been meaning to reach out. Heard some chatter through a contact. Sounds like things are getting pretty serious between Eleanor and Harrison at work. Heard it's been going on a while. Figured you should know, just in case. The text was the final, crushing blow. It wasn't just a private hell I was living in. It was an open secret. While I was home, wrestling with doubt, trying to be a supportive husband, her colleagues knew. People knew she was sleeping with her boss, and likely laughing about the husband she was deceiving. The raw pain mixed with a surge of pure, white-hot rage. I wanted to explode, to storm into that building, find them, and tear their world apart piece by piece. But the cold, strategic part of my brain, the part that had just witnessed the calculated nature of their deception, held me back. They weren't worth my dignity. They weren't worth the scene. I started the car, not following them, just driving. Anywhere. My mind was a maelstrom of pain, anger, and a chilling sense of clarity. The tears came then, hot and angry, blurring the road ahead. Years of my life, my effort, my sacrifices, my love, all poured into this lie. I drove for what felt like an eternity, the city lights shrinking in the rearview mirror, replaced by the dark, empty highway. I ended up in a small, anonymous town hours later, pulling into the parking lot of a place called Ray's Watering Hole and Grill. It was the kind of place you find when you're lost, physically and emotionally. Just a low-slung building with a neon sign, surrounded by pickup trucks. I walked in, my clothes probably ask you, my face a mask of devastation. A few patrons at the bar glanced up, then quickly looked away, sensing the raw aura of wreckage around me. I sat at the bar, ordered a whiskey, and just stared into the amber liquid, my hands shaking slightly. The bartender, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, served me without a word, giving me a soft, understanding look. After a while, an older man sitting a few stools down, who introduced himself as Ray, struck up a conversation. He talked about the quiet life, the changing seasons, anything but the obvious storm brewing inside me. He had a comforting, solid presence, like an old oak tree. Eventually, the dam I'd been holding back for weeks burst. The proof, the public humiliation, the sheer depth of the betrayal. It all poured out of me in a torrent of raw, ugly truth. I told him everything, from the first crack in a marriage to finding the clue, planting the tracker, seeing them together, Mark's confirming text. Ray listened patiently, his gaze steady, nodding occasionally. When I finished, emotionally drained, slumping forward onto the bar, he was silent for a long moment. Then, softly he spoke. Son, I've seen a thing or two in my life. Lost my ranch in a bad deal. Went through a hell of a divorce myself. Lost a kid to sickness. Life throws curveballs. Sometimes they knock you flat. He paused, taking a slow sip of his drink. That pain you're feeling right now, it's real. It's gonna hurt like hell, probably for a good long while. But you got something most folks caught in that kind of mess never get. He looked me in the eye, his expression earnest. You got proof. Undeniable, stone-cold proof. He leaned closer. Now you're standing at a fork in the road. You can let this break you completely, or you can use it. Use that proof, use this pain, to walk away and build something new. Something stronger. Something that's truly yours, free of her lies. He finished his drink. Everything that happens from here on out, that's up to you. His words weren't just advice. They were a lifeline. They cut through the fog of despair and offered a path, however painful. They were hard truths, but delivered with a genuine empathy that felt incredibly grounding after the abstract, corporate cruelty I'd witnessed. He understood the reality of betrayal, the material losses, but also the chance for rebuilding. Then came the offer that felt like a direct intervention from a kinder universe. Look, Ray said, gesturing vaguely out towards the dark, open country beyond the tavern. I got a mobile home out on my back 40. Been sitting there a while. Needs a good bit of work. Roof's a little leaky. Needs new flooring, plumbing, and electrical are basic. Gotta run it off a generator and a well. He described it as rustic, a bit rough around the edges. Exactly the kind of project my skills were perfect for. But it's got 4 walls and a roof. And it's quiet. Real quiet. Miles from anywhere. He looked at me, a small, kind smile touching his lips. Could use someone keeping an eye on the place anyway. Someone handy with tools. You could stay there. Take your time, figure things out. No rent to speak of. Maybe just help me out with some projects around the ranch when you feel up to it. It ain't much, he repeated, but it's private. A place to breathe, away from all that poison. The image he painted wasn't luxurious, but it was sanctuary. A place to escape to, completely alone, to lick my wounds and think without the constant, suffocating presence of her lies and betrayal that permeated our apartment. It was the physical manifestation of the flight, response I so desperately needed. I looked at Ray, this complete stranger who had just offered me shelter and kindness. It felt surreal, overwhelming. Ray, I don't even know how to thank you. That's incredibly generous. Don't thank me yet, son, he said, his eyes twinkling slightly. Just think about getting yourself straight. And remember what I said about getting your ducks in a row. Get your important papers. Get anything valuable that's yours alone. Get proof if you can. He paused. When you walk away from this, make sure you're walking towards solid ground, not just into empty air. He leaned in conspiratorially. I might know a guy, real quiet, who does investigative work, if you need some help getting that ironclad proof. That night, driving back toward the city, towards the apartment I shared with a stranger, a cold, determined resolve settled over me. Ray's words echoed in my head. Get proof. Get your stuff. Walk to solid ground. I had the tracking data, Mark's text, and the physical items I'd found. But Ray was right, I needed more. I needed leverage, undeniable evidence for the inevitable legal battle, and for my own peace of mind. I wouldn't be the cuckolded fool who just slunk away. I would be the man who systematically reclaimed his life. Over the next week, while Eleanor was consumed by her job and likely still seeing Harrison, I moved with a quiet, focused purpose. My craftsman's mind, used to planning complex wiring installations, applied itself to the intricate task of dismantling a life. I wasn't just packing, I was strategically withdrawing. I accessed my personal bank accounts and investments, the money I'd earned or inherited separately. I moved funds, secured access, separating my financial life from hers as much as possible without raising immediate red flags. I gathered all my essential documents: birth certificate, passport, social security card, past tax returns, insurance policies, deeds to any property I owned before the marriage, a small plot of land I'd inherited from my grandfather. Then I focused on the proof. Following Ray's suggestion, I contacted his guy, a retired private investigator named Frank, who was indeed very quiet and very good at his job. I provided him with the address of Harrison's apartment building and the dates I'd tracked Eleanor there. Frank worked fast and discreetly. Within a couple of days, I received an unmarked envelope via courier. Inside were time-stamped photos, clear, undeniable images of Eleanor and Harrison entering and leaving the apartment building together, on multiple dates spanning the last 3 months. There was no ambiguity. Seeing the photos sent a fresh wave of pain through me, but it was a cleaner pain this time, mixed with a cold, hard satisfaction. I had the proof. All of it. Next, I began packing. I systematically went through the apartment, room by room. I packed my clothes, my books, my personal mementos from before or early in the marriage that were uniquely mine. I packed the tools of my trade, my expensive, specialized equipment that represented my livelihood and was undeniably my property. I left behind all the shared furniture, the decorations, the nice things we'd bought together to build our home. I left behind the gifts she'd given me that felt tied to the marriage, the watch for our anniversary, the framed photos of us on vacations. It felt like surgically removing a diseased limb, painful but necessary. Each item left behind was a conscious act of detachment, a physical manifestation of the life I was leaving. The final night arrived. Eleanor was on that 3-day business trip, conveniently out of state. The rented van was parked down the street, loaded with the boxes containing the salvage pieces of my life. I walked through the apartment one last time in the dim light, the place that was supposed to be our forever home. It felt hollow, a beautiful stage where a terrible play had been performed. On the kitchen table, a central point of our life, I placed a single sheet of paper. My hand was steady as I wrote the 5 words that summarized everything. I hope it was worth it. Simple, brutal, final. Next to the note, glinting dully under the overhead light, I placed my wedding ring. It felt heavy, not with love, but with the weight of her lies and my lost future. I didn't linger. I didn't cry. I simply walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the cool night air. The quiet click of the lock behind me was the sound of 3.5 years of marriage ending. Driving out of the city, the van packed tight with the remnants of my independent life, I felt a profound sense of emptiness mixed with a fierce, almost desperate, feeling of freedom. The pain was still a raw wound in my chest. The grief for the future I'd lost was immense, but the suffocating pressure of living a lie was gone. I pulled up to Ray's property hours later, the dark shapes of the mountains looming in the distance. The mobile home, visible by the dim light Ray had left on, was just as he described, basic, weathered, sitting in a clearing surrounded by trees. But it was quiet. It was secluded, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like solid ground. Ray was waiting up. He just gave me a simple nod and a quiet, "Welcome home for now, son. Got coffee ready." I settled in, the physical work of cleaning and starting repairs on the trailer becoming a form of therapy. Fixing a leaky faucet, patching a hole in the wall, running new wiring for proper lights. It was tangible work with predictable results, a stark contrast to the chaotic, unpredictable emotional landscape I'd just escaped. The solitude, the fresh mountain air, the quiet rhythm of nature outside my door. It was a balm to my soul. Ray didn't pry, but checked in occasionally, offering quiet support and practical advice about rural living, and reiterating that he knew a good divorce lawyer when I was ready. I had completely cut ties, changed my phone number, blocked Eleanor, her mother, and anyone remotely connected to her on every platform. I had vanished from her life. The storm hit about a day after she returned home and found the note and the ring. My old phone, which I kept powered off but checked a couple of times a day out of morbid curiosity and strategic necessity, proof gathering, began vibrating with missed calls and voicemails. Then came the texts, a deluge of escalating messages. Initially, they were confused and demanding. Daniel, where are you? Why aren't you answering your phone? What is this note? This isn't funny. Call me now. Then they turned more frantic, tinged with a feigned worry that was transparently manipulative. Daniel, are you okay? I'm worried sick. Please just tell me you're safe. But the worst, by far, were the messages from her mother. A torrent of pure, unadulterated vitriol. You coward. How dare you abandon my daughter? You took things. That's theft. I'm calling the police. You selfish monster. Eleanor is devastated. Get your butt back here and fix this mess you made. You ruined her. After everything she did for you. Each message was like a poisoned arrow, reinforcing the toxic, delusional world they inhabited and the absolute correctness of my decision to leave. I read them all, felt the sting, and let the cold resolve harden. I would not engage. After nearly a week of this escalating barrage, with only my complete silence as a response, Eleanor broke. It wasn't a phone call, which I wouldn't have answered anyway. It was a lengthy, sprawling, multi-part text message sent in the dead of night. A desperate, unprompted confession that was anything but. The messages scrolled on and on, a masterpiece of blame-shifting, minimization, and self-pity. Okay, Daniel. Fine. You're right. Something happened with Harrison. But it was just a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything. It was because I was so stressed with work, and you were never around. You pushed me away, Daniel. You got distant. I was lonely. I was going to end it. I swear I was. Why are you doing this? Running away like this is cruel. To me, I'm sorry that things got so messed up. I made a mistake. Can we please just talk about this? Please come home. Reading those words, hunched over my old phone in the quiet solitude of the trailer, I felt no relief, no sense of closure. Only a profound, chilling disgust. It didn't mean anything. She had risked our marriage, my health, my sanity, for something she claimed meant nothing, and she blamed me for being distant, for being lonely, for her choices. She was confessing not out of remorse for betraying me, but out of panic at losing the life she had taken for granted. Her apology was entirely focused on her own feelings and what she wanted me to come back and fix it, with no acknowledgement of the depth of my pain or the calculated nature of her deception with her boss. The confession was the final, undeniable confirmation of who she truly was. The mask was off, and behind it wasn't a regretful wife, but a selfish, manipulative woman trying to salvage her comfortable lie. The confession didn't heal the wound. It cauterized it, turning the hurt into a cold, hard contempt that solidified my decision completely. I didn't reply. I deleted the messages, keeping screenshots of the most damning parts for my lawyer. The silence I maintained was my final, absolute answer. I had the proof, the tracker data, the photos, her own words, and I had my freedom. The legal battle for the divorce was looming, a daunting and painful prospect, but I was prepared. Ray's trailer wasn't a permanent home, but it was my sanctuary, a place where I could begin the long, slow process of building myself back up, piece by piece. The pain was still there, a dull ache, but the suffocating lies were gone. I had disappeared, leaving her only my silence, a note, and a ring. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Life has a funny, often cruel, way of bringing the past back to your doorstep, especially when someone believes they still own a piece of you and the comfort you provided. I had no idea then, in the quiet solitude of Ray's property, that barely a year later, Eleanor, perhaps facing the consequences of her own actions, would manage to track me down, forcing me to confront the wreckage she left behind all over again. The story wasn't over. It had just entered a new, unpredictable chapter.